Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. It might be possible to infer that the ship had a major role to play in afterlife concepts of the early Viking Age and preceding centuries in pre-Christian Scandinavia. But we don't necessarily know what that significance was. We see people buried in ships, as well as buried in placements of rocks that suggest the outline of a ship. We have extremely high status burials sometimes in these ships, and those include, for example, the Oseberg ship in Norway, one of the finest Viking Age ships preserved, which had apparently a queen buried within it. There's another one south of Hedeby in Denmark that may contain the remains of the Danish king Harald Klak. But when we turn to the pages of the Eddas, our written sources for Norse myth, we don't find that much about ships and boats. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that world, the realm of language and texts, and how Viking ships come up there, as that is the world with which I am most accustomed to work. There are three primary ships mentioned within the pages of the Eddas associated with the gods. Baldur has a ship, Hringhorni, which he is burned on in what is now considered the prototypical Viking funeral, but was not actually a typical funeral for an ordinary person. It's clearly the funeral of a very high status being and a god, the son of Odin, the chief of the gods. So we don't get any sort of description of Hringhorni, only that Baldur's funeral pyre is placed upon it. Odin whispers something in his ear before the boat is launched, and the boat is so heavy that it actually has to be launched by one of the god's enemies, a woman from among the Jotnar named Hyrroken. The god's enemies, the Jotnar, are stronger than the gods are. The next famous ship that is mentioned in connection with the gods is mentioned in connection with their enemies. This is Naglfar, mentioned in Völuspá, the poem at the beginning of the Poetic Edda, which describes creation as well as the destruction of the world at Ragnarok. Naglfar will show up at Ragnarok, piloted by Loki and containing all of the enemies of the gods. Not all of them, but containing many of the enemies of the gods. Naglfar looks like it could just mean something as simple as nail vessel, nail vehicle. Far is related to fara, like English fare. It's the typical verb for go, travel. Nagl, just like English nail, is it can be two homonyms, though. It can be fingernail. It can also be hammer and nail. So it could just be, since ships are, well, nailed together, that it's a nail vessel, but that's a little bit unsatisfying if that's what we're going to suggest, because of course we don't typically call, our trucks aren't wrench vehicles, right? It's not the first thing you would think of. You would think of like wheels with a car or truck. You would think of sails or masts or something like that with a ship, right? And Snorri Sturluson in his Prose Edda, which we have to remember is really a secondary source relative to the Poetic Edda. Snorri is trying to explain these poems and stories for an audience that no longer necessarily knows them. Snorri says that Naglfar is in fact fingernail vessel, that it is made of the fingernails of the dead who die with their fingernails untrimmed. Now, strange as it may seem, that may in fact be the old belief, as cultures around the world have notions about disposing of one's fingernail trimmings properly, because of course it is part of yourself, and putting it out there in the world, it might be something that could be of use to someone magically empowered who has evil designs on you. So sometimes they're cut in half or something like that when they're deposited in the ground. And certainly the notion that someone might die with unshorn fingernails might be dying with equipment to help the enemies of the gods build their ship. It makes some mythical sense, not to mention the fact that dead bodies may appear to have their nails continue to grow because the skin recedes, is my understanding. So that may have had something to do with the origin of that story as well. Now, the gods themselves also have a ship called Skíðblaðnir. This ship, according to Snorri Sturluson's work Heimskringla, his History of the Kings of Norway, in which he describes the gods as ancestors of the kings of Norway, belongs to Odin. But in the Poetic Edda, as well as in Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda, his other better-known book about the gods, it belongs not to Odin, but to Freyr. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but let me just first mention to you that I am here at Grimgard, the Viking city under construction by Grimfrost in Sweden, on the shore of ocean-like Lake Vänern, and this is one of Grimfrost's Viking ships. The guys at Grimfrost really care about getting things right, and if you want any sort of replica Viking stuff, be that shields, helmets, knives, board games, or if you want solidly sourced books on these subjects, including my books, or t-shirts with slogans written in realistic Viking Age runes, often by me, you should go to grimfrost.com and check them out. Those guys are great at what they do. And you can get my books there, my Wanderer's Journal, or my second edition of the Poetic Edda, or my Prose Edda next year, which I'll quote from now. Because the Prose Edda says this in the section called Gilbeginning about Freyr's ship Skíðblaðnir. Some dwarves, sons of Ivaldi, made Skíðblaðnir and gave it to Frey. That ship is so large that all the Aesir may fit on it with their weapons and armor. It always has a favorable wind when the sail is hoisted, wherever one intends to go. But when one does not need to travel on the sea with it, it is made of so many pieces and with such craft that it may be folded together like a cloth and placed in one's pocket. Off quote. It's from my forthcoming translation of the Prose Edda. Now, that sounds like, right, it can fit all of the gods on it. It's made of so many pieces. This sounds like there are more stories about it somewhere. Stories maybe about the gods going somewhere on it altogether. I don't know, but we don't have those stories preserved today. We also have in Skaldskaparmál, another part of the Prose Edda, we have the story of how it was made by Ivaldi's sons, the dwarves, together with Gungnir, the spear of Odin, and the hair of Siv, Thor's wife. So apparently there is some kind of religious significance to the notion of ship of the afterlife, although we have to note that that's not really mentioned in the Eddas. The Eddas don't talk about an afterlife that's accessed by water. Although it is notable that Hell, the realm of the dead, does have a river, Gjöll, after which the horn that Heimdallr will blow at Ragnarok, Gjallar horn, is named. It's the horn of that river. And in Völuspá, there's a hint that maybe Odin's eye is sacrificed in that river. The well of Mimir, where Odin sacrificed his eye, flows into Gjöll, apparently, just to take the hint from Völuspá. That's where Odin's eye and Heimdallr's horn are hidden. So maybe at one time there was a belief that one had to sail across that river into the afterlife. And that is why people are buried in ships or in things shaped like ships. I just don't know. But for now, it's a little bit about ships in Norse myth and religion, and from beautiful Grimstad in Sweden on the shores of Lake Vänern. Wishing you all the best.